Marcus woke up early in the morning from the familiar, gentle nudge in his side. It was Max, his loyal Labrador, who woke him up every morning for their walk. Max was not just a dog, he was a friend, a companion, and a source of support during the toughest moments of Marcus's life. Marcus picked up Max and smiled. "Time to get up, buddy. Today's gonna be a good day." Max wagged his tail joyfully and licked Marcus's face. They had been through a lot together. The loss of loved ones, moving homes, changing jobs. Max was always there, calm, devoted, and smart. Stepping out of the house, Marcus put a leash on Max. The dog happily dashed into the yard and began to run around, sniffing the fresh grass and playing with falling leaves. For Marcus, these walks were not just a routine, they were a time for reflection, an opportunity to distract himself from problems and feel connected to nature. The park nearby was their favorite place to walk. Here, Max could run freely on the grass while Marcus chatted with neighbors and sometimes struck up conversations about life. That day, the morning was particularly clear. A light breeze rustled the branches of the trees, and birds sang their morning songs. Marcus felt a sense of calm and tranquility. But everything changed when a police officer approached them. "Hey," the officer called out loudly. "What kind of dog do you have? Why is it without a muzzle?" Marcus stopped and looked at the officer. "This is Max. He's always on a leash with me. He doesn't need a muzzle, he's obedient and would never harm anyone." The officer frowned. "There have been complaints about aggressive dogs in this area. I need to check your documents." Marcus pulled out the dog's papers from his pocket. "Here are the documents. Everything is in order." The officer took them, but his gaze remained suspicious. "You look nervous. Are you hiding something?" he asked sharply. Marcus felt irritation rising inside him. "I'm just walking my dog in the morning. There are no problems here." The officer stepped forward. "Don't come any closer." Max quietly growled. He sensed his owner's tension and wanted to protect him. "Take the dog off the leash," commanded the officer. "No, he's obedient," Marcus replied firmly. The officer suddenly pulled out a taser. "Last warning." In desperation, Marcus shouted, "Please, don't do this." But the officer was already resolute. Anxiety and fear of potential threat were evident in his eyes. Suddenly, there was a gunshot. Max fell to the ground. Marcus rushed to him. "Max, no!" Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he held his friend's lifeless body, feeling the world crumble around him. After that morning, Marcus's world seemed to come to a halt. Max, his faithful friend and companion, was no longer by his side. The emptiness in his soul was as cold and lifeless as the silent body of the dog he held in that fateful moment. The days following the incident turned into an endless series of gray routines. Marcus woke up with a heaviness in his chest, as if someone had squeezed his heart in iron vice grips. He couldn't believe it had really happened, that Max was gone. Every morning he walked down the same street where the tragedy occurred, hoping to see the familiar figure of his friend, hear a joyful bark, or feel the warmth of fur under his hand. But there was only emptiness. Work ceased to bring him joy. Marcus tried to focus on tasks, but his thoughts constantly returned to Max. Colleagues noticed his gloominess, but he couldn't find the words to explain his pain. Moreover, a string of misfortunes began. Delays at work due to lack of concentration, arguments with loved ones due to irritability and withdrawal. Each day felt heavier than the last. One evening, Marcus sat alone in his apartment. In his hands was an old photograph, he and Max on a walk in the park, both smiling. Tears streamed down his cheeks. "Why did this happen?" he whispered into the void. His mind was filled with unanswered questions. Why did the officer act that way? Why didn't anyone stop him? Why Max? Marcus felt guilty, as if he could have done something differently to prevent the tragedy. This guilt gnawed at him from within. In an attempt to cope with the pain, he began avoiding people and shutting himself off. Friends called and texted, but he didn't respond. The world felt foreign and hostile. One night he had a dream. Max was running towards him across a green meadow, tail wagging with joy. But when Marcus reached out, the dog dissolved into thin air. Waking up in a cold sweat, he realized something needed to change. But how could he go on without his friend? Weeks passed, but the pain did not subside. Every morning, Marcus woke up with a weight in his chest, as if an invisible burden had fallen upon him. He tried to find solace in routine, but even the simplest tasks felt insurmountable. Suddenly, he noticed a group of people with dogs, the laughter of children, the barking of puppies. It reminded him that life goes on despite everything. But along with that came a feeling of loneliness. He was alone without Max. Returning home, Marcus sat at the table and took out a journal, a gift from a friend before the tragedy. He began to write. Today, I felt the emptiness again, but I want to believe that I can find the strength to move on. The writing became a form of therapy for him, a way to pour out his emotions and make sense of himself. However, the internal crisis did not fade so quickly. Sometimes, Marcus would wake up at night from nightmares he saw the police officer with a taser and heard gunshots. These dreams were so real that his heart raced painfully. He understood that to survive such a loss, he needed to find new meaning in life. One day, unexpectedly, his neighbor, an elderly woman named Elena, came to visit him. She knew about what had happened and just wanted to offer her support. Marcus, she said gently, I know how hard it is right now, but you are not alone. Sometimes you just need to allow yourself to be weak and ask for help. These words touched him deeply. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope. The loss of Max awakened not only grief in Marcus, but also a burning desire for justice. He could not accept that his loyal friend had been killed by a man in uniform, a police officer who was supposed to protect, not cause harm. Even before the funeral, Marcus began gathering information. He knew that without evidence, his words would remain just a voice in the void. First, he reached out to neighbors who might have seen the incident or heard something important. Fortunately, one woman, an elderly lady named Mary, told him she had seen the police officer at the scene and remembered his face. He was tall, with short hair and a cold gaze, Mary said. He introduced himself as Officer James Harris. The name of the police officer hit Marcus like a blow. James Harris. He decided he needed to learn more about him. He started searching for surveillance footage from around the incident area. Several shops and bus stops had cameras that could have captured what happened. After several days of persistent calls and visits to stores, he managed to obtain copies of the recordings. The video showed Officer Harris approaching Max and Marcus during their walk. At first, it seemed like a calm situation, but then Harris pulled out his taser and used it on the dog. Marcus felt anger and despair simultaneously. Why? Why did this person act this way? He decided to consult a lawyer, an old family friend named Michael Stevens. Michael listened carefully to Marcus and proposed an action plan. File an official complaint with the police and prosecutor's office, gather witness statements, and demand an objective investigation. Together, they began preparing documents. Michael helped draft a statement detailing the incident and attached video recordings as evidence. Meanwhile, Marcus learned more about James Harris himself. It turned out that he had been serving in the police force for over 10 years and had a reputation for being tough on the job. Several colleagues mentioned his volatility and tendency for excessive use of force. This information only strengthened Marcus's resolve to see this through to the end. However, the path to justice proved difficult. The police made it clear that they could bury the case or dismiss it as an accident. But Marcus was not going to back down. He began looking for other witnesses passers-by who might have seen the incident from afar. Some managed to come forward thanks to announcements on social media and local forums. One of them, a young man named Eric, recounted that he saw the moment when the taser was used and heard Max's cries. Gathering all the evidence and testimonies, Marcus felt that he now had a real chance to uncover the truth. But he understood that this was just the beginning of a long struggle against a system that often turns a blind eye to such cases. After filing a complaint and collecting evidence, Marcus expected the case to start moving forward, but reality turned out to be much more complicated. At the police station, he was made to understand that the investigation would proceed slowly. Too many factors were working against him. Officer James Harris had good connections within the department, and his reputation as a tough officer often overlooked such incidents. Marcus felt disappointment creeping in. He realized that to achieve justice, mere desire was not enough. He needed support. At that moment, Laura came to his aid, a journalist from the local newspaper who was interested in his story. She offered to help cover the case in the media to attract public attention. The more people know the truth, the harder it will be to bury this case, Laura explained. I can write an article and reach out to other journalists. Marcus agreed. Together, they began gathering materials, photographs, videos, interviews with witnesses. Meanwhile, Michael Stevens continued working on the legal aspects of the case. He warned Marcus about possible attempts at pressure from the police and advised him to be cautious. In the meantime, Officer Harris continued his service, not hiding his attitude towards the situation. A few times, Marcus encountered him by chance. Harris's gaze was cold and dismissive. But Marcus no longer felt alone. The support from Laura and Michael gave him strength to keep going. One evening, Laura invited Marcus to meet with a group of animal rights activists. There he met people who were fighting for justice and animal protection in the city. Their experience and energy inspired Marcus. He realized that together they could achieve more. After filing a complaint and collecting evidence, Marcus expected the case to start moving forward, but reality turned out to be much more complicated. At the police station, he was made to understand that the investigation would proceed slowly. Too many factors were working against him. Officer James Harris had good connections within the department, and his reputation as a tough officer often overlooked such incidents. Marcus felt disappointment creeping in. He realized that to achieve justice, mere desire was not enough. He needed support. At that moment, Laura came to his aid, a journalist from the local newspaper who was interested in his story. She offered to help cover the case in the media to attract public attention. "The more people know the truth, the harder it will be to bury this case," Laura explained. "I can write an article and reach out to other journalists." Marcus agreed. Together, they began gathering materials, photographs, videos, interviews with witnesses. Meanwhile, Michael Stevens continued working on the legal aspects of the case. He warned Marcus about possible attempts at pressure from the police and advised him to be cautious. In the meantime, Officer Harris continued his service, not hiding his attitude towards the situation. A few times, Marcus encountered him by chance. Harris's gaze was cold and dismissive. But Marcus no longer felt alone. The support from Laura and Michael gave him strength to keep going. One evening, Laura invited Marcus to a meeting with a group of animal rights activists. There he met people who were fighting for justice and animal protection in the city. Their experience and energy inspired Marcus. He realized that together they could achieve more. After receiving a message from an anonymous source, Marcus felt that he finally held the key to the puzzle. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. The man introduced himself as Thomas, a former police officer who could no longer remain silent. "Harris didn't just abuse his power," Thomas said quietly, looking around. "He covered up facts, falsified reports, and pressured witnesses. I saw it with my own eyes." Marcus recorded everything on his voice recorder and thanked Thomas for his courage. With this new evidence, Michael prepared a lawsuit demanding a review of the case and holding Harris accountable. Laura published a series of articles featuring interviews with Thomas and other witnesses. The public outcry grew to unprecedented levels. People took to the streets with signs reading "Justice for Max" and "Police under control." Under pressure from the public, the prosecutor's office was forced to initiate an official investigation against Officer Harris. In court, Marcus delivered a speech in which he spoke not only about Max's tragedy, but also about how important it is to fight for the truth no matter what. "We cannot allow fear and indifference to govern our lives," he said with tears in his eyes. "Max was more than just a dog. He was a member of our family, and his memory deserves justice." After lengthy hearings, the court found Harris guilty of abuse of power and animal cruelty. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation with a 2-year probation period, as well as dismissal from the police force with disgrace. Additionally, he was banned from holding positions in law enforcement for 5 years. The court also ordered mandatory training on ethics and animal handling for all police officers in the city, and internal oversight was strengthened. Marcus felt relief and pride. His struggle had not been in vain. He stood by Max's memorial in the park, surrounded by friends and activists. The sun gently illuminated their faces while the wind softly rustled the leaves of the trees. "Thank you all," Marcus said quietly. "Together, we made the world a little better."